Let me talk to you.
What's up, everybody? Razorback Zach, Marcus, MC Carlton, back with you for another podcast exclusive. It is part 2 of our Texas versus Arkansas, the rivalry, or history of, I should say. MC, dude, this thing, we talked about in part 1 how this thing kicks off back in 1894. And
contrary to popular belief, I was not around for that game.
I don't think any of us were at that point. But if you missed that, go back and listen to part 1. This one kind of goes back in recent history. We're going to go like the past 25 years here. Back from 2000 Cotton Bowl to the matchup from 2024 on November 16th. And MC, there's been a heck of a lot of matchups, and they're always good matchups. I mean, you had, like I said, in 2000, you had the 2000 Cotton Bowl.
Yeah.
You had in 2003, you had the ambush in Austin. 2015, you had the Texas Bowl in Houston. Everybody remembers that one.
And very few of these have been blowouts. You've had, the Texas Bowl really got out of hand. The ambush in Austin and the Cotton Bowl, those three are really anomalies, because everything else, I mean, even the ambush in Austin was only a 38-28 game. And I mean, it was pretty close until Arkansas scored late to kind of put it out of reach. And that was a huge upset because Texas was either number 2 or number 3 in the nation at that point, and just completely overlooking Arkansas.
And I don't think anybody, I mean, that was in the midst of the Houston Nut era back then. Yeah. And it was one of those that I don't think anybody thought that Arkansas would go into that game with a snowball's chance in Hades.
No, nobody was expecting that. And Arkansas ended up having a really good year in 2003, but nobody expected them to go down to Austin and just basically control the game for, I would say 90% of the game, Arkansas was in control. I remember off the top of my head here, I remember a couple points in the game where, it got kind of iffy, and it seemed like Arkansas always found a way to make a big play. Texas scored at one point in the second half and got it down really close. And then Arkansas had a kickoff return that crossed the 50 and put them starting on a short field in Texas territory. And of course they went down and scored again. And it was, that was as close as they got. But that one was very unexpected. I don't know that anybody knew what to expect out of that Cotton Bowl game. Cause if you remember going into halftime, I believe it was a 10-6 ball game, I believe.
I think you're right.
Going into half, and then Arkansas come out in the second half. Cedric Cobbs puts on a show. He had the touchdown pass from Clint Sterner, where I still don't know how Sterner got that pass off, because he had one guy wrapped around his waist and another guy coming to hit him high, and just kind of floated it over the line, and Ced caught it, and away he went, and he took a shot at the goal line. The hit that he took at the goal line might now be considered targeting, but he held his ground and went on in and scored. And Arkansas just kind of, I believe Major Applewhite was the quarterback for Texas in that game, and he got hurt, and they brought in Sims. And when they brought in Sims, man, it was, I mean, it was like you could smell the blood in the water for the defense, because they just started bringing the house on every single play, and Sims couldn't handle it.
Well, like we talked about in part 1, this rivalry, and it is a legit rivalry.
Yeah, whether Texas wants to admit it or not, it's a rivalry.
It's gotten kind of dormant as of late, from about 1980-ish, 1990-ish to, here recently. Because
you had that big gap when Arkansas left the Southwest Conference. It was several years before they played again.
It was. And the last time, this is currently, 2024. You've got to think the last time these guys played in 2021, Texas was a top 15 team.
Yeah.
And got annihilated.
Yeah, I don't know
Arkansas.
That they, that was early in Sark's time down at Austin, And I don't think, I'm not going to say they overlooked that game, but I don't believe they took that nearly as seriously as what Arkansas, the team, and more so the fan base was taking that game, because you get all the old heads in here that are older than me. Okay. I'm mid 40s, and I got in on the tail end of the original Texas hate. And you get those people that are in, mid 50s and above, and the people that remember Frank as a coach, not just as AD, but as a coach. You get those old heads involved in a Texas game. And I mean, Zach, you were there. You saw it firsthand.
Oh God,
the old timers were just as turned up as anybody.
There wasn't a butt in the seat that entire game from kickoff to the end of the game. And we're Arkansas coming into the season in the 2024 season. We all thought Texas was going to annihilate us this year. They were going to be come back. They were going to come back to Fayetteville. They're looking for payback. I mean, and we've seen Texas is human. Texas is human.
I mean, Vanderbilt gave them all they wanted, and
this is just going to add, especially with them being in SEC, officially in the SEC now. 2 years ago when we played them, the news broke that, they're coming to the SEC. This was their because we were the first ones after that announcement to play them.
Mm-hmm.
This was their welcome to the SEC game.
Yeah.
This adds to a new chapter and what I like to call Texas, Arkansas, the next generation.
And there's still a few guys scattered around on that team that remember coming up here and just flat out, I mean, they got embarrassed is what happened, because they had a junk score late. I mean, at one point, I believe that game was 33-7.
33-7.
And it was, I mean, Arkansas had full control. I mean, we were about to the point of like, okay, we're going to start pulling people out of the band to come play because we're just tearing it up that much.
Well, and I was 11 rows up, and I thought they were going to come see me and say, "Hey, you want to come hit somebody?" I mean, come on now. But when you look at this as a whole, you kind of have a tale of two generations here.
Mm-hmm.
Like in part one, we talked about the 69 shootout. You talked about the 1980 game.
81, yeah.
81.
Texas come in number one, yeah.
Where Texas came in number one. You had I'm trying to look at my notes here.
You had some heartbreakers in there too, that Texas kind of, they snuck a victory from the jaws of defeat.
We annihilated Texas, number one Texas, 42-11, which was the largest margin of like we said, was the largest margin of victory for an unranked team over a top-ranked team in college football history since World War II. And it's you have that break in between in the 90s when we didn't play. So you essentially have a tale of two generations here. You have the OG generation from like the 1900s who are no longer around.
I would say
to 1980, 85.
Mm-hmm.
The Lou Holtz era.
Yeah.
Ken Hatfield era.
Then Hatfield.
And then you have the break, and you have the little sprinkles of when we played them during Houston Net era. And now you have the new generation, the next generation, learning about the history of Arkansas, Texas. I say it all the time that Arkansas's has a rivalry with everybody in the SEC because we just haven't been that good lately.
Mm-hmm.
And I point to Alabama, I point to Texas, LSU. Ole Miss is a growing one that we're going to be talking about here before too long.
Yeah, that to me, that's the underrated one, and we'll get more into that later.
It is an underrated one, but this
when you
one
look
here,
at the history, it's very underrated and almost underappreciated.
What's the definition of a rivalry, MC? It's a back and forth.
Yeah, it's back and forth. You've got to have it to where, both sides equally want to beat the other, and it's taken for it to be a rivalry. For me, it has to be taken, very close to the same amount of seriousness on both sides.
Now, we own the current win streak, which is only 2. Okay.
Yeah.
Was the Texas Bowl in 15 with Brandon Allen in that group.
Yeah.
In Houston at NRG Stadium for the Texas Bowl.
Yep.
And then you have the 2021 game. But Texas has a substantial lead overall for the all-time series. 79 times these two teams have met. This will be the 80th meeting between the two. Now, is it going to be 56-24 or 57-23?
Well, and if you dive a little deeper into that, because I've done some research on this recently, and yes, there was a huge gap where they didn't play for a long time. Matter of fact, after 1991, I don't believe they played again until that 2000 Cotton Bowl.
They didn't. That's the thing.
But so look at this. Let's go back 40 years, back to 1984. From 1984,
still before my time.
From 1984, and we talked about this a little bit in part one, but we didn't elaborate on it. From 1984 to current day 2024, they have had 14 matchups, and the record is 7-7. Mm-hmm. So when Texas fans like to point out the significant lead they have in the all-time series, they're living on the Darrell Royal days, because Darrell Royal had a really good winning record over Frank Broyles in head-to-head matchups, and they're living on that. Because for the last 40 years, and the record it's tied. I mean, that's not domination. That's telling me that even though, yes, you've only played 14 times in 40 years, there's no domination going either way.
There's not, and that's what makes for a good rivalry.
Yeah, I would.
And everybody, all these new kids, and I will call them new kids because kids nowadays do not know about the just pure hatred.
Yeah.
For Texas. Because back in the old Southwest Conference, we were the only school outside of Oklahoma. I take that back.
Oklahoma wasn't in there. It was all Texas schools. It was all
Texas and Arkansas. We were the only school not in the state of Texas in that conference. Yeah. Okay? So we were hated by this conference, but we ran it.
Yeah, I mean, it was, Arkansas was a perennial contender, I guess is a good way to put it, because there were a lot of seasons that it came down to Arkansas versus Texas, and that was going to decide the conference championship.
Again, 1991, we moved to the SEC mm-hmm. when the I guess the Southwest Conference, or whatever you want to call Big 8 or Big whatever, when that dissolved and Texas went to the Big 12 in 1996. Mm-hmm. I mean, you didn't have anything from 91 until 2000.
Yeah, I mean, almost a decade. I mean, you might as well say a decade. Basically, it was basically a decade, because it wasn't even in the regular season of 1999. It was. Matter of fact, it was the first game of the new millennium.
It was the new. Yes.
I mean, how about that?
I remember where I was when we were to watch, and I still have. I can't fit in this shirt anymore.
Yeah,
because I'm a big old boy now. Yeah. But I remember my stepmom bought me a shirt.
I've got
an official shirt of that game, and I still have it. It's in my storage room somewhere.
Yeah.
But it's when Arkansas and Texas meet, it's like nowadays when Arkansas LSU meet, or what they're trying to force on us, the Arkansas Missouri.
And honestly, that Missouri one's growing a little bit. It's growing a little bit, because I will Ruskin and Zach pointed this out, and I think it was Derek Ruskin that pointed it out, that the night Arkansas beat Tennessee this year, big win, you beat a top 5 team. Mm-hmm. He pointed out that there were just as many people talking about Missouri getting beat that day as there were Arkansas upsetting Tennessee. And when that happens, that means that's your rival. It is. He said that, I've always been one of these of like, okay, Missouri's not a rival. But then when he pointed that out, I was like, yeah, I think he's got a point here. It's starting to slowly grow into it.
Well, and for years, we hated on this rivalry.
Yeah.
And if you sit back and look at the history of these, and I will go the other 15 teams in the conference, but if you really want to stop and think, take Texas and OU out of the SEC. Take A&M and Missouri out of the SEC, and you have the original 12. Okay? And I say original 12. Yes, Tulane was an original member of the SEC. I'm talking about from 1992 to 2012. The 12 teams in the SEC. Who's Arkansas's rival in those 12 teams?
I mean, the closest thing you would have one to there would probably be
LSU.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because of everything that went down with all the Black Friday games.
But no matter who you ask, no matter who you ask, Texas, regardless of what time of year it was, regardless of if we were playing them that year or not, Texas was our rival. Well, you can't have a rivalry if you don't play them for a decade. You have a renewed rivalry, a new generation rivalry, which is why I think, for me personally, and I'm going to piss a lot of people off, the rivalry right now sits at 7-7.
Yeah.
Or even you've got, what did we say, 4 since 2000? We played them 4 times since 2000?
2000, 2003, 2004.
I forgot about the 04 game. We played them 8 times.
Texas Bowl at the end of the 14 season.
Hold on, we're gonna pull Jesse in here. Jesse's giving us symbols here. Jesse, what you got, bud?
6 times. We got demolished in 08.
Yeah. Petrino's first year.
Right. But the other thing, if you think back, and Zach, you'll probably remember this, MC, you like playing the games too, so you'll remember as well. Every version of NCAA football, Texas-Arkansas was a rivalry game.
It was a rivalry game. Sure was.
Didn't matter we weren't conference at the time.
Right.
Anytime you put Texas on your dynasty and scheduled a game against them, it was a rivalry game.
Yep.
Yeah. Now it's not a trophy rivalry game because you have, and again, you have a history with A&M. You have a history with LSU. You have a growing history of sorts with Missouri.
Yeah, it's getting there.
But those are trophy games.
But
a true rivalry doesn't involve trophies. It doesn't involve playing for something. You're playing for pride. You're playing for heart because you just hate that school, man. It is like Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels level hatred if you're a WWE fan. All right.
It is McCoys. Yeah.
Yeah. It's one of those that predates, and it's one of the oldest rivalries in college football that nobody talks about.
Yeah.
That's what I don't understand. Look, I'll be honest with you, MC. I'll put this one up there with like the Michigan, Ohio States. Okay. The Auburn, Alabamas.
It doesn't get the national notoriety, but the history is there.
I want to know why. I want to ask somebody who's been around a while why it doesn't get the notoriety. Is it because it's Arkansas and nobody respects Arkansas no matter what?
I don't know. I don't know what it is because, there were times, and we talked about this in part 1. There were times where, the 69 game, the biggest game in this rivalry, arguably, was literally the first made-for-TV game because they moved it from an early October matchup to the last game of the season, and they pushed in all their chips that both teams would be undefeated when you got to that point, and that's what happened.
Now, if you want to,
it was just it was the rivalry of the '60s, and when Texas really started taking control, I think it lost a little bit of its luster because they won several in a row, and it just seemed like Arkansas would find new ways to lose that game every year. We talked about,
So you're basically saying Arkansas was cursed. See what I did there?
You could, we talked about that in our podcast, and we traced it all the way back to that 69 shootout.
And if you haven't listened to it, go back and listen to it in our archives on our podcast page. Because we kind of, and we could have gone further back than a 69 shootout, but that game,
you could have gone before that, but that was
that
the
game
one that
there
really
was the game. Yeah. The president was there. It was like you had said, the highlight game of the year, of the century. They called it the game of the century.
Yeah.
And every time Texas comes to town, and it doesn't matter if Arkansas has a sub 500 record or if they're, in some alternate dimension where they're undefeated, it does not matter. Arkansas comes to play because we went into the 21 game thinking, oh my God, Texas is going to beat us. Texas is just going to destroy us. And I even said it. I was sitting in Razorback Stadium going, I'm freaking out about this game, dude. I don't know how, but and we jump, and final score is 40-1, 40-21. or something like that. It was a 41-21 or something
40,
like that.
40 to 21 because we had a kind of an off number.
And I walked away going, holy dude.
Yeah.
And there is nothing like, and there are only certain times that I'm okay rushing the field. But there was nothing
okay
like, but there's, now MC, I know we rushed the field against Tennessee. But when you rush the field against Texas, that's got a different aura to it. That's got a different feel.
That one had a different feel, and I was okay with that one just because of what this program had come out of.
I usually don't get emotional, and I don't understand when people get emotional during football games. I do now.
Mm-hmm.
And I will cry when Dallas decides to, actually get a football team and win, but that's neither here nor there at this point. But I saw grown men with tears in their eyes at the end of that game.
Yeah, and it's a nostalgia. It's a, not every time I've talked to some of my older relatives, and they almost feel like that every time we beat Texas since 69, it's almost like you're getting a tad bit of a feeling of revenge because everybody feels like Arkansas should have won that game,
Mm-hmm.
And every time you beat them since then, it doesn't make it any easier to take, but it's almost like you're getting a little bit of comeuppance or revenge for the way that game went down.
And now that this is a conference game, and the way that the SEC is going to do this, and I know we're kind of coming to the end, we're going to try to keep this short this time. The way that the SEC is doing the schedule nowadays, I really wish and I really hope that Texas is one of our permanent rivals, our permanent opponents.
I hope so. It's going to be hard because I think Texas A&M is going to make that same push, and Oklahoma is obviously going to make that same push.
Well, and I mentioned this on our weekly show, and I mentioned this a few times on the Dave Ellswick show. They're moving away from A&M Arkansas at Dallas at Cowboy Stadium to put Texas A&M there.
Yeah.
Do you know? And I get it. I want them both to lose that game. Because you have when we do during football season, when we do the SEC pick'em between you, me, and Jesse.
Oh yeah.
There's always a game where I'm like, can they both lose?
Yeah, exactly.
That's one of them. That's one of them.
and that's one of those games. My uncle, who's kind of the reason I'm the football fan that I am today. Back before you had overtime, if you had a matchup of two teams he didn't like, he would always say, "Man, I hope that one ends up in a 0-0 tie." Back when you still had ties in college football.
Oh,
it's
yeah.
Like if Texas and Notre Dame played, it was like, oh God, I hope that ends up in a 0-0 tie.
Oh yeah. Yeah, definitely. And the thing about it though is sometimes you have moments like the 2021 game, like the ambush in Austin.
Yeah.
Okay. Where you just know, or you have that feeling of Arkansas is just not going to be able to pull this one out. And then they put all the pieces together at the right time and they come out with a win.
Yeah.
Now, some might call it our national championship. I'm okay with that because you can't tell me there's a bigger game when Texas ends up on our schedule, whether it, back in the day when it was non-conference or if it was a bowl game or now that it's a conference game. You can't tell me at the end of the day that's not the biggest game on the schedule. That's
the one that if you look at the schedule in late July, early August, before the season starts, if you took 10 Arkansas fans of varying ages, let's go from 25, 35, 45, 55, 65. Every one of them is going to circle that Texas game and be like, this is the one I want.
We can do it with our own staff here at ITHP.
Yeah.
We have those ranges. We've got Sarah and D-Matt in their 20s. You've got me, Jesse, and Loki in our 30s. And you've got you.
I'm the old head.
Yeah. Well, you're not as old as you think, man.
I'm pushing 50, bro. I mean,
you still got a few years. You're good.
But yeah, I did get in on the tail end of the original Texas hate because I remember that last game versus Texas in 1991 in Little Rock. And when Arkansas pulled that upset, how crazy everybody went. You know, I talked about the band playing the George Strait song, All My Exes Live in Texas. And, you know, all the old heads, you know, the Clay Henry types, those guys, the Rick Schaefer's even, just losing their mind over that game because of how much it meant.
You know, you have three. I mean, we've even talked about ranking the rivalries between all the six of us here at ITHP.
Yeah.
You know, you've got the old crew. I say old heads, but, you know, guys like you and older, you know, mid 40s to older, who say Texas undoubtedly is our rival.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Then you've got guys like me, Jesse, and Loki, who are kind of in the gray area of, we know that they're our rival, but you still have LSU, who we grew up with. And let me pull Jesse back in here. And Jesse, I don't want to speak for you, but you're like less than a year younger than me. LSU is technically the rivalry we grew up with.
That's the one we grew up with. Going back to the notoriety of the rivalry, I think the biggest thing in that is when we left the Southwest Conference, it wasn't an annual game when TV really took over college football.
Yeah, that's fair.
True. That's fair. But if you ask
me personally, Texas will always be top rival just because I was raised by a Texas fan, and I hate Texas. Burnt orange is the ugliest color in the face of the earth.
Yes.
But Texas can say we're not a rival. Texas fans can say, oh, no, Arkansas is not a rival anymore. But find me a Texas fan that likes Arkansas.
Yeah.
They don't exist.
Or find me an Arkansas fan that likes Texas.
Well, and they made too big of a deal about that 2021 game. You know, there was talk among Texas fans of, you know, can't believe we lost this game. And they just, I will say they don't take it as serious as Arkansas fans do, but it's one they sure don't want to lose.
Well,
it's right to me. It's, you know, when you get to people my age, it's right there with Texas A&M and also with Oklahoma. But for the younger generation, you know, it's kind of an afterthought, but it's still one that they feel like they shouldn't lose. And that was another piece of the rivalry that came into it. You know, the tea sippers, the pinky out crowd in Austin. I mean, it's just, you know, how dare we lose to lowly little old Arkansas, you know, and that, and that just kind of added to the fuel of like, oh, okay. Y'all gonna stay up there in that ivory tower with all your amenities and everything that you've got in your program. You're gonna come over here, and we're still gonna kick your tail and knock them horns off of you.
Well, and again, this is a series that we're gonna continue to do. You know, we're gonna go into the LSU game, but then like you said on a closing note, you ask guys like Dylan and Savage, Sarah, who are mid to late 20s, they're gonna say Ole Miss. They're going to say Missouri. They're going to say anybody but Texas because they weren't around for all of that.
And there is a case to be made for Ole Miss as well. And that one, you know, the Texas one is mainly, I would say, mainly 80-90% of it is football. There is some history in basketball, but the mainstay of that sticks to football. If you get into Ole Miss, you've got the football side of it, and then you've also got the baseball side of it.
Yes.
There's a huge piece to that one.
We're going to be, this isn't just a football series that we're going to be doing. Well, the majority of it is, yes, it's football.
Yeah.
But we're going to be taking the big three, basketball, baseball, and football, because you've got different rivalries. I'll give you a little preview for the coming episodes after this one. You're going to have different rivalries in every sport. Like,
oh, yeah.
Kentucky's a rivalry. Like, you're a basketball junkie. Kentucky's the rival, especially with Calipari now here.
Now, oh my God.
You know, the Kentucky game, big rivalry.
Yeah.
You know, Auburn, for me, because they claim them as to be a blue blood. They're not a blue blood. They're not a basketball blue blood. Dear God in heaven. That's
not at all.
Story for another time before I get on my soapbox. But in closing, though, you know, if you want to talk rivalries, you're talking about one of the oldest rivalry games in college football with Arkansas and Texas. And if you don't know what we're talking about, go back and listen to part 1. We cover that one from 1894 to like up to the 1990s, up to the 90s.
Yeah.
Up to 2000. This one, you have, and like I said before, it's a tale of 2 generations. You have the old generation that made the rivalry, and now you have a reignited rivalry in this generation. So we're going to pull Jesse back in here. He's got a closing statement. Jesse, what you got, boss?
I always say it, and I'll say it again. Steve Sarkisian said it best at SEC Media Days. Arkansas fans hate Texas more than we like ourselves.
Yeah, and I can't disagree with that.
I second that. MC, final thought before we get out of here.
Man, this is just another one. I'm anxious to see where this rivalry goes. Now that they are back to being a conference foe, is it going to be an every year thing, or is it going to be one of these that the way the SEC rotates it, we only get it maybe every 3 years? I'm hopeful that they will look at the history of this and make it an every year game.
So let me, and I know we're trying to close up, but that leads me to a question for you then. And we can discuss this on a weekly show at some point. You have your 3 trophy games in Missouri, LSU, and A&M.
Right.
Okay. Would you trade, let's say, the Southwest Classic
100%.
for the Texas game every year?
No doubt. Without hesitation.
Why?
I would retire.
If you had a trophy to play for versus playing Texas,
retire that Southwest Classic trophy, because to me, the whole Southwest Classic trophy was tied to playing that game in Jerry World. It's not like the Iron Bowl or one of those that has been a home and home series. The Egg Bowl, another one that is a home and home series that you give the trophy back and forth. I would give that up in a heartbeat to have a guaranteed game, a home and home versus Texas every year. 1 year in Fayetteville, 1 year in Austin. Just keep it rotating.
I mean, you've got, crap, dude. You've got the world's largest outdoor cocktail party.
Mm-hmm.
You have the Iron Bowl, the Egg Bowl. You have Battle for the Boot. Yes, that is an Arkansas rivalry. Mm-hmm. But you have certain games in the SEC in the country now that have that notoriety. Bigger one, Army, Navy, Michigan, Michigan, Ohio State, Notre Dame, USC, Notre Dame, Penn State. You have all USC, UCLA. Okay, you have all these rivalry games. I want to see Arkansas, Texas being talked about as one of them.
Well, and I think when you start to see more consistency from the Arkansas program of winning more than 5-6 games every year, when you raise that up, because Texas is one of the blue bloods. It is what it is.
You're going down a rabbit hole, which we can go down at another time, as far as Arkansas and they're winning winning more than 5 or 6 games. But I 100% get your point.
Yeah,
100% get your point. But we're going to go ahead and wrap things up, man, and be looking for more podcast episodes on Arkansas's rivals as far as football goes. I think we're going to do one on LSU, and I think we're going to do one on Missouri in the coming weeks.
That one may not take long.
That one may not take long. But like I said, dude, check us out. Thursday, 7 p.m., Facebook, YouTube. We are on the Dave Ellswick Show, 101.1 The Answer, 9 a.m., 10 a.m. Fridays. We'll have that Facebook stream if you're not in Central Arkansas. And then, of course, subscribe to our podcast channel, man. We've got content coming out all the time. You do not want to miss anything that happens here at Inside the Hog Pen. But we're going to go ahead and sign off for Marcus MC Carlton and the beard behind the board, Jesse Thurman. I'm Razorback Zach. Good night, everybody.